This is a special report from ABC News Digital.
I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with this ABC News Digital special report. Twitter is going public. The social site tweeted out the news late Thursday, and investors are buzzing, or should we say chirping, about its potential. But even as the markets debate potential prices and valuations, Twitter's users are asking, what's the site going to look like as it's going to start chasing profits for its stockholders, potential stockholders, that is, of course. Right now, I want to bring in ABC News tech editor Joanna Stern and Yahoo Finance Jeff Mackey. Jeff, good morning to you. I want to start with you before we get to Joanna, because there's a lot of details that a lot of people are going to be wondering about if it's going to change that 140 character limitation. But first, the confidential filing with the SEC. Why?
Well, via the Jobs Act, which was a bill signed to encourage small businesses, companies can file to go public without saying a word. All they have to do, Twitter tweeted out, it took them less than 140 characters. They said, we're filing a confidential S-1 in process of doing an IPO. That was it. We don't know any data on their revenues, their users. We know nothing, and that's all they have to tell us.
Okay, so what's the encouragement then for a company to do that?
Well, a lot of money. Why would they keep it private? Because they don't want anyone in their business. They like to keep these things secret as long as possible. If they're under $1 billion revenue, which Twitter is, they don't have to give away any trade secrets. And the other thing they can do, Dan, they don't have to go public at this point. And they can still be in the auction process. The company can stay private. They can do really whatever they want. Although what this does is just set the wheels in motion and get everyone all a Twitter, if you will, over this IPO. It's pretty exciting stuff.
This is certainly exciting. Well, the hype I see is contagious. So what, if anything, then gives you pause about getting excited about this?
Well, you know, we have the Facebook potential here, and Facebook's role in this can't be understated, because remember a year ago with the debacle that was the Facebook IPO, everyone was wondering whether or not mobile advertising was a real business. Now, Facebook, about a month ago, proved that it is. They made a ton of money off mobile ads, and that really set the stage for this Twitter IPO. So we know the business model will work. We know that they won't have to change the model all that much. Twitter has access to a ton of information. You follow me. I'm America's sweetheart on Twitter. So Twitter knows that. They know that you and I are in communication together. Twitter knows that, and they can sell targeted advertising, things that we would like. So you and I, if we wanted to go buy a Volkswagen Bug together, Twitter would know that, and they could sell it to us.
America's sweetheart, somewhat debatable. I don't know if I can verify just that, but we're going to work on that. But the bigger question is, though, if Facebook is unable to capitalize on that with mobile ads, is Twitter going to be as successful? I mean, if I'm out there and I'm sitting looking at possibly getting into one of these tech companies, what makes Twitter more appetizing than Facebook?
Well, you know, I don't want people to be chasing this IPO because, again, we know nothing about what the company's going to do, what they plan to do. But here's why it could be more valuable. Facebook knows who you pretend to be. Facebook knows who your mom is, who you kind of act like, people you went to high school with. Twitter knows who you actually talk to. Twitter knows people who are in your network, who you're listening to, who you're really influenced by. That's incredibly valuable information. And so Twitter, as a business model, they're simply going to be trying to incorporate advertising in that model in as inobtrusive a way as possible. And so an ad will scroll down in your Twitter feed. It'll go out to very select audience, people who might be interested in that ad or good or service. And they're going to be able to parse that information. They know much more about you than Facebook does because they know the people you're talking to day after day. Incredibly valuable information for users. And Twitter, people who use Twitter should be encouraged by the fact that it's not in their best interest to make a system that is going to inundate you with ads. Twitter's entire goal will be to incorporate ads without overwhelming users and putting them off. And so really the user experience shouldn't change all that much. The model's not broken, so Twitter's not going to try to fix it.
All right. Well, listen, I wanted to talk about how the sausage is made in just a minute, to talk more specifically about the road show, get into the nitty-gritty of that. But I want to bring in Joanna to that and to continue on with that, Joanna. So what are users going to expect might possibly change to Twitter now that it's going to start chasing potential investors?
Yeah, I think Jeff hit the tweet on the head talking about the advertising, right? The advertising is definitely going to be the focus. It's been the focus for Twitter, and I think we're going to see more of it, but I don't think we'll see it in a really obnoxious way. And he also really talked about the mobile impact, right? Facebook had to make that point. Twitter's got to make that point too. And I think we're going to see a lot of improvements in mobile. I think Twitter's done a lot with its mobile apps. They've made them more friendly. I think they're going to go even further, and there are reports already. The New Yorker had an exclusive. They're talking about an improved iPhone app coming soon, one that goes a pretty different direction than what they have now, making it easier. And we've seen some changes to the user experience already on mobile. They've added this blue line. Lots of people were kind of talking about that or tweeting about that a couple of weeks ago. What's this blue line? So they've done some small tweaks to the mobile experience, also the desktop experience, to increase that sort of engagement, but I think also to increase that advertising, or to kind of see where people are chatting more.
So from America's sweetheart, Mackie, to an actual sweetheart, Joanna, I want to ask you then, what is the potential difference then for the user interface from Facebook to Twitter then? Because we're talking about how you're building your own kind of personality and sharing it online.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Jeff said the same thing, in the sense that I don't think they're going to change the format of the user experience. You're not going to fix what isn't broken, right? People love that experience, they love that stream, but they are sort of toying around with different ways of that stream, right? So they added that blue line. Could they add some other things to make it to intersect the advertising? If you are talking about something, could they put in the hashtag or something along those lines to get you to join a different conversation? I think we might see things along that route. I think also we've seen Twitter trying to get into different media models, right? They released an app a couple of months ago, I don't know how many people are actually using it, which is this Twitter Music app, trying to get people to chat more about music, drive sales to music. I think they might do the same thing, or we're hearing they're going to do the same thing in the video arena. Can they embed video more? Can we get more advertising around that? So trying to build out Twitter as more of a media company, really, I think that's where Facebook differs, and Jeff talked about that as well. I mean, this is more of a place where people are going to chat about certain topics in the same way that people go to a news site and read about certain topics. So if the world's conversation is happening in this space, how can Twitter take advantage of that?
So Jeff, kind of expanding out on what Joanna's just talking about, where are other potential areas for Twitter for growth?
Well, they haven't even begun to tap what they do. As she said, this is America's news feed now. I am an investor. I had a hedge fund. You pay thousands of dollars for news feeds that have now been obviated by Twitter just by following people in the financial community. Wall Street is just largely a sewing circle, just a bunch of people gossiping with one another. They're breaking stories on Twitter far before they get to the news. Twitter's injected itself in the news cycle between the event and what you see happening on the newscast, on the broadcast, because it's social media. It's truly the power of the masses. Twitter has not begun to exploit that market for all it's worth in terms of the amount of money they can make. And it's just a fascinating business model in that sense. Facebook, on the other hand, is much more passive. You show up on Facebook whenever you kind of want to, but when you're watching the Super Bowl, you go on Twitter and you tweet about it. When you're watching a program, America shares that event together, and so as the advertising model shifts from a more passive, we sit back and you inject a commercial into a show, you're able to make it more of an active process, because when something happened, the Boston bombing, for instance, when that happened, people went to Twitter to find out what was happening right away. Was that information filtered and correct? No. Not at all. That's where the newscast comes in. But if you want something raw, dirty, and right away, that sense of immediacy, that's where you go for Twitter. And in terms of how they change the model, all they have to do is start putting a few ads in that, and they haven't even begun to explore how much money they can make off it.
Raw, dirty, and right away. I don't know that that's going to be the next tagline for Twitter, but you never know. It could very well be.
I'm shooting it straight with you, my man. That's why I'm America's sweetheart, because I'm giving you the straight dough.
That debatable point.
I want to be America's sweetheart.
Joanna, I've already coined you as such. Mackie, we're going to work on a different hashtag that's a little bit PG friendly. But listen, hey Jeff, before we let you go though, I wanted to ask you about Zuckerberg's tweet, essentially saying that, lesson learned from his company's IPO, and saying, the market might not be ready, but essentially hang in there. What are your thoughts on his reaction?
In terms of the IPO, he actually came out and he was talking about his own IPO, and he said he was really skeptical that the market may not be ready. He's skeptical of Twitter, but you know what? He also has said of his own company he was afraid of doing the IPO because of the impact it would have on employees and the impact it would have on operations, and he's changed his tune. He's done a 180 on that. He says it's made Facebook a much more disciplined company, and shareholders finally, at long last, are being rewarded by buying stock in Facebook. And as I said, that paved the way. So whether or not Zuckerberg's going to buy Twitter, who knows? But as far as he's concerned, it was good for the goose to go public. And so I would guess Twitter, being the gander in this case, will be good for them as well.
Joanna, what do you think? Mea culpa appropriate?
Yeah, and one thing I did want to mention is that when you look at the user base, Facebook has a much larger user base, right? They're over 1 billion users. Twitter doesn't have that size. They do not have that size. I think their last number is 200 million active users. So I think when you look at the size, they have there's less to jeopardize in that sense, but I think they also have to look here at how do they grow the user base, and I think that's where I was talking about before, enhancing the user experience, making it easier to get into Twitter, get into those conversations. That's where I see some impact coming as well.
All right, plug away time. Joanna, what's your handle?
Joanna Stern.
All right, Matt.
And America's Sweetheart.
Matt.
I'm going to change it right away to America's Sweetheart.
Ouch, it's already taken. As you can see, at Jeff Mackey.
All right, Jeff Mackey, Joanna Stern, thank you both very much. I certainly appreciate that. Of course, we have a complete write-up on abcnews.com on the latest for the potential rollout for Twitter's IPO. For now, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with this ABC News Digital Special Report.
This has been a special report from ABC News Digital.